All right, today we're jumping into a book that basically took everything we thought we knew about money and turned it completely upside down. It's Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a story all about two fathers and the totally opposite lessons they taught about money and how to live.
You know the advice we've all heard a million times, right? Study hard, get good grades, and go find a safe, secure job. For decades, that was the master plan. It's what our parents were told, and it's what they told us. But Kiyosaki kicks things off by asking, is that advice not just old, but maybe even a little bit dangerous now?
So the whole story revolves around these two major father figures in young Robert's life. There was his actual father, who he calls his poor dad, and then there was his best friend's dad, his rich dad. Now, on one hand, you have his poor dad. This guy was brilliant, super educated, had a PhD, and a stable, respectable government job. And then on the other side, you have Rich Dad, who never even made it past 8th grade, but went on to build a huge business empire. Both were successful in their own ways, but their paths, and more importantly, their beliefs about money were polar opposites.
Poor Dad's whole vibe around money was cautious, almost fearful. He'd always say this phrase, one a lot of us have probably heard, which suggests that having money is somehow a bad or corrupting thing.
But Rich Dad, he just flipped that old saying right on its head. He believed that it's the struggle for money, not being able to provide for your family, not being able to help people. That's what really causes problems and leads to desperation.
And here's Poor Dad's game plan in a nutshell. It's all about playing it safe within the system. The main goal? Become a really good employee for someone else. It's about finding a job.
Rich Dad's advice, though, was in a completely different universe. It was all about ownership. Forget climbing the corporate ladder. He was talking about owning the ladder. The goal wasn't to get a job, it was to create jobs. And this one little difference in their thinking sets up everything else in the book.
So with these two clashing worldviews, Rich Dad explains this trap that he sees almost everyone fall into. He called it the rat race.
The rat race, you know the feeling. It's that endless loop where you go to work to earn money, just to pay your bills. But then, as you make more money, your lifestyle gets more expensive, so you have to work even harder to keep up. You're just constantly chasing your own tail, never actually getting anywhere. It's like being on a hamster wheel. And the scary part is how predictable this cycle is, because it's the safe path we're all taught to follow. It all starts with school, which leads to a job. Then life happens. You get a mortgage, a car payment, some credit card debt. You get a raise at work, which is great, but then your taxes go up and you start wanting nicer things. So you end up stuck, running faster and faster on that treadmill just to stay in the exact same spot.
So how do you get off the treadmill? Well, to break this cycle, Rich Dad taught his very first and probably most important lesson. It's just one sentence, but man, it changes everything.
So the lesson started when a 9-year-old Robert and his friend Mike went up to Rich Dad and asked, "Can you teach us how to get rich?" His answer? He gave them a job dusting cans in one of his stores for a measly 10 cents an hour. They did this for weeks, feeling totally ripped off and used.
When Robert finally got fed up and complained, Rich Dad explained the real point. That feeling of frustration and anger, that was the lesson. He wanted them to get a taste of what life feels like when you let a tiny paycheck control your life. He wanted them to feel that push so they'd be motivated enough to find another way.
Rich Dad laid it all out. He said most people's financial lives are driven by just two emotions. First, there's fear. The fear of not having enough money to pay the bills. That fear is what gets you out of bed and to a job you might not even like. Then, the second you get that paycheck, desire kicks in. You start thinking about all the cool stuff you can buy. This endless cycle of fear and desire is the engine that keeps the rat race going.
And this is the punchline. This one statement is the absolute core of Rich Dad's entire philosophy. The goal isn't to be an employee of your money. It's to become its master. It's not about working harder for a paycheck. It's about building things that make money for you. So to really hammer this lesson home, Rich Dad decided to push the boys even further. He made them an offer that sounded, well, kind of crazy. He told them to keep doing the same job, but this time for zero pay. Nothing. The whole point was to force their brains to stop focusing on a wage and to start looking around for opportunities to make money that were hiding in plain sight.
And guess what? It worked. With their minds off the paycheck, they started noticing things, like the fact that the store manager was just throwing out old comic books. So they asked if they could have them. They took those comics, cleared out a spare room, and opened up a comic book library for the neighborhood kids. They charged 10 cents admission and even hired another kid to run it for them. Just like that, they had created their very first business, an asset that made them money whether they were there or not. Their money was finally working for them.
That comic book library wasn't just a fun little project. It was the real-world result of everything Rich Dad was teaching them. And it all boils down to one incredibly simple, powerful rule. This, he said, is all you really need to know about money.
This is it. Rule number 1. It sounds almost too simple, but truly understanding this one difference is the absolute key. If you want to build wealth, this is the whole game, right here. So, an asset is just something that puts money in your pocket. That's it. Think of things like a rental property that pays you rent each month, or stocks that pay you dividends, or a business like that comic book library. It feeds you.
And a liability? Well, it's the exact opposite. It's something that takes money out of your pocket. This is your car loan, your credit card debt, student loans. It eats your income.
And this, according to Kiyosaki, is the great misunderstanding. The middle class spends their entire lives working hard to buy liabilities, like fancy cars or a bigger house, because they think those are assets. But the rich, they spend their time and money acquiring actual income-producing assets.
And this brings us to the book's most famous and, honestly, most controversial point. For most of us, our home is our single biggest asset, right? But Rich Dad argued that your house is actually a liability because every single month it takes money out of your pocket for the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and repairs. So he leaves us all with this one big question to think about. Using these simple definitions, is your home really an asset or could it be your biggest liability?